At 2:13 a.m., my phone lit up. The name flashing on the screen wasn't a surprise. It was my boss. I picked up instantly, adrenaline flooding my veins as if a missed call could end my career. His voice was calm, almost casual, just a quick update on tomorrow's meeting. I didn't even notice my son's name appearing right beneath the call log. At 2:17 a.m., my phone buzzed again. This time, it was my 14-year-old son. The sound of his name on the screen felt different. I hesitated. My boss's voice still echoed in my head, warning me about focus and commitment. I silenced the call. The house was dark, my wife asleep, my career, as always, awake. I told myself I'd call him back in the morning. At breakfast, my son wouldn't look at me. My wife moved around the kitchen with the kind of quiet that hurts more than yelling. I asked if something was wrong. No one answered. I didn't know it then, but that moment, the decision to answer one call and reject the other, was the beginning of everything unraveling. And if you've ever told yourself, "I'm doing this for my family," while missing every moment with them, you might want to hear the rest of this story. It could save more than just your career. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, in a house that always felt 2 steps away from falling apart. The winters were cold, the summers were sticky, and the sound of overdue bill collectors calling the house phone was a constant background noise. My father worked double shifts at the factory. My mother took whatever part-time work she could find: cafeteria aide, cleaning houses, babysitting the neighbors' kids. I was too young to understand the full weight of their struggle, but I felt it every time I saw them pretend everything was fine at the dinner table. I told myself, at 16, that I'd give my future family the kind of life mine could only dream about: a safe home, security, maybe a little luxury, enough so that money would never be a topic of worry. That dream burned in me like a promise carved into stone. By my mid-20s, I'd married Claire. She had a smile that made me feel like the years of working odd jobs and eating dollar burgers had all been worth it. We didn't have much when we started, but we had a vision. She believed in me, more than I believed in myself. I still remember her words on our wedding day: "Whatever you chase, I'll be there to cheer you on." Not long after, I landed my first real break, a junior analyst position at a prestigious finance firm in New York. It was everything I'd wanted: a steady salary, a clear career ladder, the promise of growth. Claire was over the moon. She even helped me pick out my first real suit, the one that made me feel like I belonged in the tall glass towers I used to only see in magazines. The early years were intoxicating. I worked long hours, yes, but they were full of purpose. I'd come home tired but proud, with stories about meetings, deals, and the projects I was trusted with. Claire listened to every word, genuinely excited. She'd pack me lunches when I stayed late, surprise me with coffee during my weekend shifts, and remind me that all of this was for us. And it really was. For us. We dreamed of buying a house with a backyard, maybe even starting a family. When our son was born, I doubled down on my efforts. More hours, more projects, more sacrifices. I told myself every late night at the office was an investment in his future. The twist? Back then, Claire wasn't just tolerating my work obsession. She was fueling it. She'd say things like, "You're building something incredible for our family. Don't feel guilty for missing dinner." Or, "This is the grind before the reward. We can handle it." It made me feel invincible, like I was not just chasing success, but carrying my family toward it. Every promotion felt like proof that I was doing the right thing. And each time my boss praised my commitment, I wore it like a badge of honor. What I didn't see, what neither of us saw, was the cost creeping in slowly. Like a leak in the foundation you don't notice until the floor starts warping. Back then, I wasn't worried. My wife was proud of me. My boss trusted me. My colleagues respected me. I thought I was doing everything right. I thought the American dream was exactly this: work hard, sacrifice now, and happiness will follow. What I didn't know was that dreams can turn into traps when you're too busy chasing them to notice what you're stepping over along the way. At first, the late nights felt temporary. A busy quarter here, a high-priority deal there. I kept telling myself, just get through this stretch, and I'll be home more. But this stretch turned into a cycle. Every time one project ended, another, somehow more urgent, appeared. My phone became an extension of my hand, its screen lighting up with emails and messages even during family dinners. Claire would glance at it, then at me, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The first real miss was our anniversary. I was supposed to meet Claire at a small restaurant we'd loved since our early days. Instead, I was stuck in a conference room negotiating terms for a client in London. I called her around 11 p.m., promising we'd celebrate the following weekend. She said, "It's fine, I understand." And I believed her. Then came our son's first school play. He was playing a tree, one of many. But to him, it was everything. I'd marked the date on my calendar, even rehearsed the lines he wanted to practice. But on the day of the performance, my boss called an emergency meeting. I convinced myself it was unavoidable, that missing one play wouldn't matter. When I got home that night, the costume was lying on the couch. Claire was in the kitchen, quiet. My son was already asleep. "How did it go?" I asked her. She shrugged. "You should ask him tomorrow." I didn't. Over time, Claire stopped asking me to attend things. She organized birthday parties, school events, and doctor appointments without me. She'd send me pictures and videos, saying things like, "You were missed, but it went well." She carried the household like a single parent, even though I was technically there, and I told myself it was okay because I was providing. The twist? I genuinely believed the solution was just around the corner. Every time a deal wrapped, I'd say to myself, "After this project, I'll take a break. After this quarter, I'll be home for dinners again." But there was always another project, another client, another late-night call from the boss. Each after this bled into the next, until years passed in that same loop. Claire never stopped supporting me outright, but her encouragement changed. It became quieter, more mechanical. She stopped offering to bring me dinner at the office. She stopped asking if I'd be home by 8. Looking back, I think she stopped hoping. At the time, I didn't see it as a drift. I saw it as temporary distance, the kind that could be fixed with one good vacation, one big surprise, one meaningful gesture. But life doesn't wait for your perfect timing. It keeps moving, with or without you. By the end of that year, I realized I didn't know what grade my son was in without checking old emails. I didn't know Claire's favorite book anymore. And still, I told myself. After this project, the day I was promoted to vice president felt like the peak of everything I'd worked for. Years of late nights, missed dinners, and endless flights had finally crystallized into the kind of success I once only dreamed about. My salary tripled overnight. A corner office with a skyline view became mine. My boss shook my hand with genuine pride, and the entire floor applauded. Driving home that evening, I rehearsed how I would tell Claire and our son. I imagined the look on her face, the excitement in his eyes. In my mind, This was the moment everything would start to make sense. The moment they'd see that every absence, every missed moment, had been worth it. When I walked through the door, Claire was in the living room, a small gift box on the coffee table. "Congratulations," she said, smiling faintly. Inside the box was a leather briefcase, sleek, professional, far more expensive than anything I'd ever buy for myself. My name was embossed on the front. "I thought you could use it," she said. I was touched. "This is incredible, Claire. Thank you." She smiled again, softer this time. "You've earned it." I didn't notice it then, but there was something in her voice. Something I mistook for pride, but looking back, I recognize as resignation. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, running my hand over the briefcase, imagining all the important meetings I'd carry it to. I thought it was a symbol of support. I didn't realize it was also a symbol of distance. Over the following weeks, the house felt quieter. My son barely asked about my work anymore. He used to greet me at the door when I came home late, full of questions about the city or my office. Now he'd just wave from the couch without looking up from whatever he was doing. Claire didn't complain. She didn't argue. She didn't ask when I'd be home. At first, I thought this was a sign of understanding, that she had adapted to my schedule, that she trusted I was doing what needed to be done. The truth was far more unsettling. She had stopped expecting me. The briefcase came with me everywhere. Every time I placed it on a boardroom table, I felt proud. But back at home, I started to notice it sitting by the front door like an uninvited guest. Always present, never welcome. One evening, I mentioned taking a week off for a family trip. Claire nodded, but her enthusiasm was muted. "That would be nice," she said. "We'll see if it works out." I didn't think much of it. I was too busy planning for the next quarter, the next promotion, the next deal. It never occurred to me that the very thing I thought would prove my devotion to my family, the pinnacle of my career, was the same thing that made them realize how far away I'd drifted. Looking back, that briefcase wasn't just a gift. It was a quiet surrender. A way of saying, if this is the life you've chosen, I'll stop asking you to change it. I didn't see it then. All I saw was success. All they saw was someone who no longer belonged to them. By the time I settled into my role as vice president, my absence had stopped being a disruption and started becoming a routine. Claire had become a single mother in everything but name. She handled school drop-offs, parent-teacher conferences, doctor's visits, birthday parties, all without me. She no longer texted me updates or asked if I could make it. She simply scheduled everything, assuming I wouldn't be there. In the beginning, she would call during the day to share little things. The way our son's team won a soccer match, how he made a drawing that won a ribbon at school, even the funny thing he said at dinner. But those calls became rare. Then they stopped altogether. At first, I thought this was efficiency. We were both busy, I reasoned. We didn't need constant updates to prove we were on the same page. What I didn't understand was that her silence wasn't about efficiency. It was about acceptance. Our son, Ethan, adapted faster than I expected. Too fast. At 10 years old, he stopped waiting up for me at night. He no longer ran to the door when he heard my car in the driveway. If I poked my head into his room to say goodnight, he'd be reading or on his tablet, mumbling a distracted "night, Dad." It was like watching someone quietly dismantle a bridge between us, piece by piece. One evening, I came home earlier than usual, before dinner. I thought I'd surprise them. Instead, I found them sitting at the table already halfway through the meal. Ethan looked up, surprised but not necessarily happy. Claire smiled politely and said, "There's a plate in the kitchen for you." I sat down, trying to join the conversation. They were talking about a science project he was working on. I asked a question, but the rhythm of their conversation stumbled. It was clear they were used to talking without me. The house had adjusted to my absence so thoroughly that my presence felt like an interruption. The twist came one Saturday afternoon. Claire had taken Ethan to a friend's birthday party. I was home alone for once, and I wandered into his room, something I rarely did. On the wall above his bed hung a framed drawing. It was simple. 3 figures holding hands. Me, Claire, and Ethan, standing in front of a house with a big sun overhead. The drawing was old. I remembered him making it when he was 6. What caught me was that he had kept it there all these years. Despite the growing distance, despite my absence, despite all the missed games and dinners, he still kept that picture up. It was as if, in some quiet corner of his heart, he was holding on to the family he remembered. I stood there longer than I meant to, staring at that picture, wondering if there was still time to fix the version of me in his mind. That night, I didn't say anything about it. I just joined them at the table again, this time making an effort to listen more, to ask about his science project, to remember the details. Ethan answered politely, but I could tell the bridge between us was still missing several planks. Claire noticed the effort. She didn't comment, but there was a flicker in her eyes. Not trust, not forgiveness, but maybe recognition. Recognition that, for a moment at least, I was trying. The family had adapted to life without me. But that drawing on the wall told me one thing. Adaptation wasn't the same as moving on. And maybe, just maybe, that meant there was still hope. Claire never stopped giving me warnings. At least not at first. They weren't dramatic ultimatums, not the kind you see in movies. They were quieter, the kind that slipped into conversations when I wasn't really listening. "Ethan's been asking about you a lot lately," she'd say while packing his lunch. Or, "He's got this big presentation coming up. It would mean a lot if you could be there." I'd nod, barely looking up from my phone. "Of course, I'll make it work." And I meant it in that moment. But the moment always gave way to something else. Some crisis at work, some last-minute call, some fire that only I could put out. Then there was the text. It was simple, almost shy. "Dad, can you come to my science fair on Thursday?" I was in the middle of a conference call when I saw it. I smiled to myself, replying quickly, "Wouldn't miss it." The problem wasn't my intention. The problem was my calendar. In my head, Thursday meant the following week. I didn't bother to double-check. On the actual day of the fair, I was in the office polishing a presentation for a client. At 5 p.m., I left early, feeling proud that I was keeping my promise. I drove to the school, imagining Ethan's face when he saw me. The gymnasium was quiet when I arrived. A few parents were packing up displays. I spotted Claire near the exit, carrying a trifold board with Ethan's name on it. "Where is he?" I asked, breathless. "He's in the car," she said, her voice flat. "I thought it started at 6. "It ended at 4, she replied. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. I walked to the parking lot and saw Ethan in the back seat, staring out the window. He didn't turn when I opened the door. "Hey, bud," I said, trying to sound casual. "I'm sorry I missed it. How'd it go?" He shrugged without looking at me. "It's fine." It wasn't fine. The drive home was silent. Claire kept her eyes on the road. I sat there, replaying every small warning she'd given me over the past few months. all the moments I'd brushed off with promises I couldn't keep. The twist was cruel in its simplicity. I'd shown up. I'd actually gone to the school, walked into that gym, ready to keep my word. But I'd gotten the day wrong. My presence meant nothing because I hadn't been there when it counted. That night, I went into Ethan's room to check on him. He was lying in bed, scrolling through his phone. "Hey," I said quietly. "Can I see your project?" "It's in the garage," he mumbled. I hesitated, then asked, "Do you want to talk about it?" He finally turned to look at me, his expression unreadable. "Not really." It was one of the first times I realized that my absence wasn't just a physical thing. It had become emotional. Even when I tried to show up, I was late in ways that couldn't be fixed by an apology. I went back to my own room that night feeling the weight of something I couldn't quite name. I told myself I'd do better next time. But the truth was becoming harder to ignore. There was always a next time, and I was always late. By the end of that year, the house felt different. It wasn't just quieter, it was colder. Claire still did all the same things. Packed lunches, folded laundry, reminded Ethan to take his jacket. But the warmth was gone. The casual touches, the shared glances, the quiet jokes we used to trade in the kitchen, they had all evaporated. One night, as I was leaving for another late meeting, she said it plainly. "We can't keep living like this." I stopped at the door, unsure if I'd heard her right. "What do you mean?" Her voice was calm, almost rehearsed. "This marriage, this life, it's not working anymore." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't anger. It was worse than that. It was resignation. I tried to reassure her, the same way I always had. "Things will calm down after this quarter, I promise." She gave me a tired smile. "You've been saying that for years." The rest of the week, I caught myself watching her in moments when she thought I wasn't looking. She seemed lighter when I wasn't around. She laughed more with Ethan. She moved through the house as if she'd already adjusted to life without me in it. The twist came one Saturday morning. I was searching for a tax document in the home office when I found a folded piece of paper tucked under a stack of bills. It was a business card. Family law attorney, neatly printed, with a handwritten note on the back. Consultation scheduled Thursday at 2 p.m. My stomach dropped. I put the card back exactly as I'd found it, my mind racing. She hadn't mentioned it. She hadn't confronted me. She hadn't even hinted. That night at dinner, I watched her across the table, wondering if she was waiting for the right moment to tell me. But she acted as if nothing had changed. For the next few days, I lived in a strange limbo, half expecting her to hand me divorce papers, half hoping she wouldn't. Every conversation felt loaded, every silence heavier. And yet, she said nothing. Looking back, I realized that was her final act of grace. She hadn't decided completely. She was giving me a chance I didn't recognize at the time. But even without her words, I could feel it. The air in the house was different. The way Ethan looked at me was different. The way Claire stopped asking anything of me, stopped expecting anything from me. That was the real warning. I wish I could say I did something big right then. I wish I could say I dropped everything and fought for them. But I didn't. I went back to work, convincing myself I could fix it later. Later was slipping away faster than I realized. It happened on a Thursday night. One of those nights when the office refused to let me go. I'd gotten home late, loosened my tie, poured myself a drink, and was just settling into the quiet when my phone lit up. The name on the screen was my boss. It was 2:07 a.m. I didn't hesitate. I answered on the first ring, my voice sharper than my mind. He needed an immediate update on an Asia-Pacific deal. It wasn't urgent enough to justify the time, but in my world, the hierarchy of urgent was decided by whoever signed the checks. As we spoke, my phone buzzed again. This time, a different name lit the screen. Ethan. I froze for a moment. It was the middle of the night. Why would he be calling? A dozen questions flashed through my head, but my boss's voice pulled me back. I silenced Ethan's call. I'll call him back in a few minutes, I told myself. Just a few minutes, but those minutes stretched into an hour. By the time the call ended, I was exhausted. I slipped the phone into my pocket, telling myself I'd talk to him in the morning. When I woke, the house was silent. Claire was sitting at the kitchen table, her coffee untouched. Her face was pale. "What happened?" I asked. Her eyes met mine, flat and cold. "He had a panic attack last night. He called you." The words hit me like a blow. "Is he okay? Where is he?" "He's in his room. He's not talking to anyone." I went to Ethan's door and knocked softly. "Hey, bud, can we talk?" No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. Claire appeared behind me. "He's upset. He feels like he can't talk to you. He thinks you don't want to hear from him." My chest tightened. That's not true. She looked at me, and for the first time, there was no anger in her voice, just sadness. "He doesn't know that." I spent the entire morning pacing, waiting for him to come out, waiting for a chance to fix it. By afternoon, Claire asked me to step outside for air. That's when she told me the twist. "He almost left last night," she said quietly. I woke up and found him packing a bag. He said he didn't feel like this was home anymore. My knees went weak. "Why didn't you tell me?" She stared at me. "You were on the phone, and I knew which call you'd choose." Her words cut deeper than anything she'd said before. I went back inside and stood in the hallway outside Ethan's room, my hand on the doorknob, but I couldn't bring myself to open it. I didn't know what I'd say. That night, for the first time in years, I didn't pick up when my boss called. I sat in the dark, staring at my phone, thinking about the 2 calls I'd gotten the night before, and which one I'd chosen to answer. The next morning, the house felt heavier than it had in years. I sat at the kitchen table waiting for Claire and Ethan to come downstairs, unsure if I should say something first or wait for them to speak. Claire came in, her hair pulled back, a mug of coffee in her hand. She didn't look at me when she sat across from me. "We need to talk," she said, her voice low but steady. I nodded, my throat dry. "I know." She took a breath, and when her eyes met mine, there was no hesitation. "Last night wasn't just about one phone call, and you know it. This has been years in the making." I tried to respond, but she held up her hand. "Don't. Just listen." She began listing moments, not as accusations, but as facts, delivered in the same calm voice. "You missed his first soccer game, his piano recital, the father-son camping trip in 5th grade, parent-teacher nights, birthdays. The night he won the Regional Science Award, you were in Chicago at a conference. I stopped asking you because I got tired of hearing the same promise. I'll make it up to him." I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to say I'd been working for all of us, that I'd been providing, that I'd done what I thought was right. But the words felt thin, empty in my mouth. Claire's voice softened, but her eyes didn't. "Do you know how many times he's tried to call you at night? Not just last night. Many nights. Nights when he couldn't sleep. Nights when he felt sick. Nights when he was just scared and wanted to hear your voice." I froze. I didn't know." Her expression shifted. something between sadness and disbelief. Of course you didn't. Because even when you were home, you weren't here. Your phone was always closer to you than he was. The weight of her words sank deep. I thought about my call logs, my endless meetings, the nights I silenced my phone without even thinking. Ethan came into the kitchen then, his backpack slung over one shoulder. He didn't look at me. "Morning," he said quietly, directing the word more toward Claire than me. "Ethan," I said, my voice cracking a little. "Can we talk?" He hesitated, then shook his head. "I have to get to school." I stood as he walked toward the door. "I'll drive you." "No thanks, Mom's taking me." His voice was polite but final. I watched him leave, my chest tight. When the door closed, Claire turned to me. "Do you understand now?" I ran a hand through my hair. I didn't realize. I thought that he'd understand, that he'd forgive you just because you meant well. She shook her head. "He doesn't want apologies. He wants a father who shows up when he needs him. And right now, he doesn't believe you can be that person." Her words landed like a hammer. I wanted to say I could change, that I'd prove myself. But I could see it in her eyes. She'd heard it all before. I sat back down, my hands clasped tightly. "What do I do?" I asked quietly. She hesitated for a long moment. "That's not a question for me anymore. That's for you and him. But I will tell you this. He's not going to wait forever." Her voice broke slightly on that last word, and then she stood, gathering her things for the day. I watched her go, the sound of the door closing behind her louder than it should have been. For the rest of the day, I sat in that kitchen, staring at my phone, scrolling through old text messages from Ethan. Some I'd responded to, many I hadn't. One from months ago stopped me cold. "Dad, are you awake?" It had been sent at 1:13 a.m. on a random Tuesday. I had no memory of it. Scrolling further, I found more. "Dad, can you help me with something?" "Dad, are you coming home soon?" "Dad, can you call me?" There were no responses from me. Claire was right. He had been reaching out. I just hadn't been listening. That night, after Claire and Ethan had gone to bed, I sat alone in my home office. The room felt like a monument to everything I'd built and everything I'd lost. The glass shelves held awards with my name engraved, plaques from the firm, framed photos of me shaking hands with clients I could barely remember. It was supposed to feel like success, but all I saw were reminders of the nights I wasn't home, the dinners I missed, the calls I ignored. For the first time in years, the weight of it all hit me. I had spent decades climbing a ladder I believed mattered, only to find that the view from the top was just empty. I buried my face in my hands and felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time. Grief. Grief for the moments I couldn't get back. Grief for the father I never learned how to be. Grief for the man Claire had married, who no longer existed. I don't know how long I sat there before my phone buzzed. It was my boss. For a moment, instinct kicked in. I straightened up, wiped my face, reached for the phone, because that's what I'd always done. But something stopped me. I stared at the name on the screen, the same name I'd chosen over Ethan's the night before. On the third ring, I answered. "Hey," he said casually. "Just wanted to check something. Did you send over the numbers from last week's file?" That was it. That was the urgent middle-of-the-night reason. A file. I felt something inside me snap. Not anger, not even frustration. Just the realization of how small this all was, compared to what it had cost me. "Yes," I said slowly. "It was sent days ago." Perfect, he replied. Appreciate it. Get some rest. The call ended, and I sat there staring at the phone in my hand. All these years, I'd treated every buzz, every notification, every midnight ring as if the world depended on it. And here I was, losing my family over calls that could have waited until morning. Calls that, in the end, didn't matter at all. I leaned back in my chair and looked around the office again. The awards looked different now, less like achievements and more like tombstones, marking the death of pieces of my life I could never recover. For the first time in years, I cried. Not the frustrated tears I'd shed after a bad quarter or a lost deal. These were the kind of tears that came from somewhere deeper. The kind that come when you finally see yourself clearly and realize you don't like the person staring back at you. I thought about Ethan, about the calls I'd missed, about Claire, holding the household together alone while I buried myself in work that didn't even require me as much as I'd believed. And in that moment, I understood something I'd been avoiding. My job didn't own me. I had handed myself over willingly, piece by piece, because I thought it was noble. I thought it was necessary. It wasn't. The only thing necessary now was to figure out if I could undo the damage, or at least stop adding to it. That night, I made myself a promise. Not the kind I'd made before. The vague, I'll try to do better promises. This one was different. Because for the first time, I understood the truth. The firm could replace me tomorrow. My family couldn't, and if I kept going the way I had been, I'd wake up one day with no calls to answer at all. The following Monday, I walked into the office with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. My mind was set before I even stepped through the glass doors. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about quarterly targets, upcoming deals, or my next promotion. I was thinking about Ethan, about Claire, and about how many more chances I'd lose if I didn't act now. My assistant met me at my office door. "They're waiting for you in the conference room," she said. "It's about the Westbrook deal." The Westbrook deal, our largest project of the year, worth tens of millions. It was the kind of deal that could cement my legacy at the firm. It was also the reason I'd missed nearly every dinner in the last 3 months. I walked into the conference room. The partners were seated, the air thick with anticipation. At the head of the table was my boss, Martin, the man whose calls I had always answered without hesitation. "Glad you're here, Mike," Martin said. "We're about to finalize the lead team for Westbrook. This is going to require long nights, weekends, maybe a few trips to Europe. We need you to head it." I stood there for a moment, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. A year ago, I would have said yes before he finished the sentence. Now all I could see was Ethan's face when he didn't look at me, Claire's quiet voice telling me she couldn't live like this anymore. "I can't take it," I said. The room went silent. Martin raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "I can't lead Westbrook," I repeated, my voice steady. "I need to step back from major projects. I need to be home." The silence deepened. A few partners exchanged confused glances. One of them shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Martin leaned back, studying me. "Mike, this is the biggest deal of your career. You've worked for years to get here. Are you telling me you're walking away?" "Yes," I said. "I am." For a long moment, Martin just looked at me. I braced myself for the fallout. Anger, disappointment, maybe even the end of my job. Instead, he surprised me. "You know," he said slowly, "I did the same thing once. I said yes to every deal, every late-night call, every weekend trip. I told myself I was doing it for my family too. I frowned, unsure where this was going. My wife left me 10 years ago, he continued. My kids stopped talking to me. I haven't seen my daughter in 4 years. And you know what? The firm didn't fall apart without me, but my family did. The room was quiet again, but for a different reason now. Martin looked at me with something almost like respect. If you're smart enough to make this call now, you're smarter than I was. Westbrook will survive without you. Go fix what matters. I was stunned. I'd expected anger, not understanding. Relief washed over me, mixed with something else. Gratitude, maybe even hope. As the meeting ended, Martin pulled me aside. Don't waste the chance you're giving yourself. These deals come around every year. Your family doesn't. I left the office that day feeling lighter than I had in decades. For once, I wasn't heading into another late night of conference calls and strategy decks. I was heading home before dinner, not because of an emergency, but because I wanted to. When I walked through the door, Ethan was at the table working on homework. Claire was in the kitchen. Both of them looked surprised to see me. "You're home early," Claire said cautiously. "Yeah," I said, setting my bag down. "I will be from now on." Ethan glanced at me, then back at his notebook. He didn't say anything, but he didn't walk away either. It wasn't acceptance, not yet. But it was a start. That night, for the first time in years, we ate together without me checking my phone. And for the first time in years, I felt like I'd made the right call. The first week after I turned down the Westbrook deal felt strange, liberating, but also unsettling. I had expected my decision to spark some kind of immediate shift at home, maybe even relief from Claire and Ethan. But the reality was quieter. Claire still spoke to me in the same measured tone. Ethan still kept to his room after school. Dinner conversations were polite, short, and careful, like everyone was waiting to see if this was just another passing promise. I didn't blame them. I had given them 1,000 reasons not to believe me. One evening, Claire and I were clearing the table after dinner. She finally broke the silence. "You've said you'd change before." Her voice wasn't accusatory, it was tired. "I know," I admitted, "and I didn't follow through. But I'm serious this time." She gave a small, almost sad smile. "We'll see." Those words stayed with me. "We'll see." It wasn't defiance. It was self-protection. Ethan was more direct in his skepticism. When I offered to drive him to soccer practice, he said, "Mom usually takes me." When I told him I'd be at his next game, he shrugged and said, "If you want." It wasn't anger. It was doubt. The hardest part was knowing he had every right to feel that way. A week later, I was in a strategy meeting at the office. Even though I'd stepped back from major projects, my role still required attention. The meeting was mid-discussion when my phone buzzed. I glanced down and saw Ethan's name. For a split second, instinct told me to silence the call, the way I always had. But another instinct, one I'd ignored too many times, pushed back. "I need to take this," I said, interrupting the discussion. My colleagues looked surprised, but I stepped out into the hallway. "Hey, buddy," I answered, trying to keep my voice calm. "What's going on?" There was a pause on the line. Nothing," Ethan said. "Just wanted to see if you'd pick up." I closed my eyes, my chest tightening. "I'll always pick up," I said quietly. On the other end, he didn't respond right away. Finally, he said, "Okay, I have to go." Then the line went dead. I stood there in the hallway for a moment, the hum of the office around me feeling distant. It hadn't been an emergency. It hadn't been important at all, except it was. It was a test. And for once, I had passed. That weekend, I tried again to spend time with Ethan. I suggested we shoot hoops in the driveway, something we hadn't done in years. He hesitated, then agreed. We played for nearly half an hour in a comfortable silence, neither of us mentioning the phone call. Later, Claire pulled me aside. "He called you during a meeting, didn't he?" I nodded. Her expression softened, just slightly. "He was checking." "I figured," I said. There was a long pause. Then she said, "Keep passing." But the skepticism didn't fade overnight. Claire watched my schedule carefully, noticing whether I really came home on time, whether I really stayed present at dinner. Ethan still didn't volunteer stories about school or friends the way he used to. Trust wasn't rebuilt by grand gestures. It was rebuilt by showing up every time, without fail. There were moments that felt like setbacks. One evening, I had to stay late for a smaller client issue. When I walked in after dinner, Ethan barely looked up from his tablet. I sat down across from him. "Sorry I'm late," I said. He shrugged. "It's fine." But I could hear the unspoken, "You always say that." I didn't try to defend myself. Instead, I asked about his day, even though his answers were short. I knew these conversations weren't about the details. They were about showing him I cared enough to keep asking. Weeks passed like this. Small tests, small wins, small moments of doubt. One night, Claire and I were sitting on the couch after Ethan had gone to bed. She looked at me for a long time before speaking. "You've been consistent," she said. I nodded. "I plan to keep it that way." Her gaze softened, but she didn't smile. "You've made promises before." "I know," I said. "But this isn't about promises anymore. It's about being here. Every day. I'm not going anywhere." For the first time, she didn't answer right away. And for the first time, her silence didn't feel like a wall. It felt like she was deciding whether to open the door again. The turning point came a week later. Ethan came into my office at home holding his phone. "Dad," he said, "Coach just moved the game to Thursday. Can you still come?" I paused for a moment, glancing at my calendar. Thursday had a meeting scheduled, one I could technically move, but it would be noticed. "Yes," I said. "I'll be there." He looked at me for a second, as if measuring my answer. Okay. It wasn't trust yet, but it was something closer than before. Consistency is quieter than grand gestures, but it's heavier. It carries more weight because it can't be faked. In the weeks that followed, I made a deliberate choice. Be present in the everyday moments, not just the highlight reel. I showed up for Ethan's practices, not only the games. I drove him to school twice a week. I joined Claire in the kitchen for dinner prep, even if it was just chopping vegetables in silence. At first, it felt awkward. The spaces I was stepping into had long been filled without me, and I could feel that I was an extra piece in a puzzle that had learned to fit without my shape. But the awkwardness didn't scare me. It grounded me. It reminded me that earning my place back wasn't about being welcomed immediately. It was about being steady enough that, one day, my presence wouldn't feel like an intrusion. Ethan's distance was the hardest part. He didn't reject me outright, but he didn't rush to close the gap either. At dinner, he'd answer my questions with a few words, sometimes just a nod. During drives, he kept his eyes on his phone, earbuds in. One evening, I drove him to soccer practice, and halfway there, he spoke up. "Are you still going to those morning meetings?" he asked. "Not the ones I don't need to," I said. He nodded without looking at me. You used to go to all of them. I know, I replied quietly. That was the end of the conversation, but it stuck with me. His questions weren't random. They were subtle probes, small checks to see if the new version of me was real. One Saturday afternoon, I passed by his room on my way to the laundry. His door was half open, and I caught a glimpse of him at his desk, sketching something. I didn't want to intrude, so I knocked. He turned, a little startled. Oh. Hey. What are you working on? I asked. Just stuff, he said, closing the sketchbook slightly. I didn't push. Okay. I'll be in the kitchen if you need me. Later that night, when I went to say goodnight, the sketchbook was sitting on his desk. The cover was closed, but sticking out from the side was a page corner marked with bright colors. I didn't open it, but the curiosity gnawed at me. 2 days later, Claire was doing laundry and called me into Ethan's room. She was tidying up when she noticed the sketchbook again, this time open on his bed. I froze when I saw the page. It was a drawing of our family. Ethan in the middle, Claire to one side, and me on the other. Not the old drawing from years ago, where my figure felt almost like a memory. This was new. In this one, I was holding Ethan's shoulder. The three of us stood in front of the same house, the same sun overhead. But this time, the colors were brighter, fuller. Claire looked at me quietly. She didn't say anything, but I could see the flicker of something in her expression. Recognition, maybe even hope. I didn't mention the drawing to Ethan right away. I didn't want to put him on the spot. Instead, I kept showing up, letting my actions speak louder than any reaction to a sketch. Over the next few weeks, he began inviting me, quietly, subtly, into his world. He'd ask if I could help him practice passes in the backyard. He'd leave his door open when he was playing video games, and sometimes I'd sit on the floor beside him, just watching. Claire noticed, too. One night, as we were cleaning up after dinner, she said, "He's starting to let you back in." I smiled faintly. I noticed. "You haven't commented on it," she said. "I don't want to scare it away," I replied. It wasn't dramatic. There were no sudden breakthroughs, no tearful reunions. It was slow, quiet work, just like the drifting apart had been. But one evening, as I passed Ethan's room, he called out, "Hey, Dad?" I stopped at the doorway. "Yeah? Do you want to see something I've been working on?" He held up the sketchbook. On the page was the family drawing again, now more detailed. The faces were clearer, the lines more confident. "It's really good," I said, stepping closer. He shrugged, but I could see the faintest trace of a smile. "I added you this time." I didn't know what to say. My throat tightened, but I just nodded. "Thanks, buddy. That means a lot." He looked down, embarrassed, but he didn't close the sketchbook. That night, as I stood in the hallway, I realized something. The drawing wasn't just a picture. It was a quiet invitation, a sign that maybe, just maybe, the door wasn't shut forever. And for the first time in years, I let myself believe there was a future where I wasn't just someone in Ethan's past. It's strange how quickly a routine can change when you commit to it. Months passed, and my life no longer revolved around last-minute calls, rushed dinners, or checking my phone at the table. I began to notice the little things I'd missed for years. The way Ethan's hair stuck up in the mornings. The way Claire hummed softly when she cooked. The quiet comfort of sitting on the couch together, even without speaking. It wasn't just that I was home more. It was that I was here more. I wasn't thinking about my next meeting or glancing at my email. I was actually present. Ethan began to open up more, slowly at first. Small details about his day, stories about friends, a funny thing that happened at school. I listened, really listened. Sometimes that was all he wanted. We started a Saturday morning ritual, pancakes at home, then a walk to the park. Sometimes we'd toss a football. Sometimes we'd just sit and watch the dogs run by. These weren't grand events, but they were ours. Claire noticed the difference, but she didn't comment much at first. Her trust wasn't something that would come back overnight. But I could feel her watching, testing, waiting to see if this was another phase. The twist came one Thursday evening after dinner. We were clearing the table when she looked at me and said, "Ethan has spring break coming up." I nodded. "Yeah, I know." She hesitated for a moment, then said, "What would you think about taking a trip, just the three of us?" For a second, I didn't understand what she meant. "A trip?" She smiled slightly, almost shyly. "A family vacation. We haven't done that in years." I felt a rush of something I hadn't felt in a long time, hope mixed with nervousness. "I'd love that," I said quickly. "Where should we go?" She shrugged. "Someplace simple. We don't need fancy, just time together." Ethan, who had been listening from the couch, looked up. "Can we go to the mountains? I want to see the stars without city lights." I glanced at Claire. She nodded. "Then mountains it is," I said. In the weeks leading up to the trip, the energy in the house shifted. There was a quiet excitement, the kind that comes from planning something meaningful. We talked about trails to hike, places to visit, even which board games to pack. For me, it wasn't just about the destination. It was about the fact that they wanted me there. The night before we left, I found myself in the garage loading bags into the car. Claire came out with a cooler. "You packed already?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, smiling. "I didn't want to be the reason we were late." She laughed softly, a sound I hadn't heard in a long time. "That's new." The trip itself wasn't perfect. We got lost on a trail once. It rained for half a day. Ethan dropped his phone in a stream, but none of that mattered. We sat around a campfire at night, roasting marshmallows, talking about nothing and everything. We hiked during the day, stopping to take pictures at overlooks. I watched Claire's shoulders relax in a way they hadn't in years. I saw Ethan's smile stretch wider, freer. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The vacation didn't fix everything overnight. It wasn't some magical cure, but it was proof that we were moving forward. Not as the family we used to be, but as the family we were becoming. And that was enough. Months after our trip to the mountains, I found myself back in a familiar place, a conference room. But this time I wasn't there to negotiate a deal or present quarterly numbers. I'd been invited to speak to a group of young associates about work-life balance. I almost laughed when they asked me. A few years ago, I was the last person anyone would have come to for advice on balance. But maybe that was the point. I stood at the front of the room, looking at their eager faces, some fresh out of school, others already starting to wear the fatigue of long hours. I could see pieces of my younger self in all of them. "When I was your age," I began, "I thought success was measured in promotions, bonuses, and how often my boss called me late at night. I thought being the first one in and the last one out meant I was winning." I paused, glancing around the room. And for a while I was winning, at work. But at home, I was losing. Badly. There was a quiet stillness as I continued. I missed birthdays, I missed school plays, I missed conversations that would have mattered more than any meeting I've ever been in. I told myself I was doing it for my family, but the truth is, my family just wanted me. I took a deep breath. Here's the lesson I wish someone had told me. Don't ever turn off your phone when your child calls. No matter what's happening in that boardroom, it can wait. I promise you, it can wait. The people who truly need you won't always keep calling if you keep missing the chance to answer. After the talk, a few of the associates came up to thank me. One of them said quietly, "I think I needed to hear that today." I nodded, hoping my words would stick with him longer than they had stuck with me when I was in his place. That evening, I was driving home when my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. It was Ethan. I pulled over immediately. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. "Hey, buddy," I answered. "Hey, Dad," he said. His voice was casual now. No trace of the hesitance that used to be there. "Just wanted to know if you're free this weekend. There's a game. I'd like you to come." I smiled, a warmth spreading through me. "Wouldn't miss it." There was a pause. "Cool, see you then." The call ended, but I sat there for a moment, holding the phone, feeling the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd answered this time. Immediately, without hesitation. It wasn't just about the call. It was about everything that came before it. Every small choice, every consistent action that had led us back to this point. For years, I'd been afraid I'd missed my chance to be the father and husband I wanted to be. Now, I understood something I hadn't before. Redemption isn't a single moment. It's 1,000 small ones, repeated over time. And as I drove home, I realized the circle had finally closed, not in a perfect storybook way, but in a real one. We were still building, still healing, and this time, I was here for all of it.